Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast, your source for insights and ideas on how to lead your church in the 21st century. At the Future Christian Podcast, we talk to pastors, authors, and other faith leaders for helpful advice and practical wisdom to help you and your community of faith walk boldly into the future. Whether you're a pastor, church leader, or a passionate member of your faith community, this podcast is designed to challenge, inspire, and equip you with the tools you need for impactful ministry. And now for a little bit about the guest for this episode.
Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. Today, Loren Richmond Jr. is in conversation with the Reverend F. Douglas Powe Jr. Dr. Powe is president of Phillips Theological Seminary in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church. A noted scholar and author on congregational vitality and evangelism, he has written several books, including The Adept Church and Sustaining While Disrupting. President Powe is a sought-after speaker on faith, leadership, and the future of the church. A reminder before we start today's conversation, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share Future Christian with a friend. Connect with Loren, Martha, and Future Christian on Instagram. Shoot us an email at loren@resonatemediapro.com with comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes. Your support means a lot to us in making this podcast possible.
Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast. I'm grateful to be here recording live and in person with President Reverend Doctor, what's your official title? Doug Powe?
It is. And actually, it is, of course, President Powe, but I'm actually the Muzan Biggs Professor of Methodist Studies at Phillips. So it's exciting to be able to take on such a wonderful title that was filled by, of course, Dr. Biggs and Dr. Blue previously, but more importantly, my role as president.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having that conversation. So we're actually recording in person at the General Assembly of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, which is exciting. So if you hear some chatter and buzz and maybe an interruption, that's what it is. But let's begin, I suppose, with that. This is your first General Assembly of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. What do you think?
It has been really, really wonderful. I appreciate sort of the spirit throughout the place.
Yeah.
And worship has been creative and wonderful.
Yeah.
Kicked off by Dr. Bernice King.
Wasn't that great?
Which was just absolutely fantastic. And the way she connected it to her father's sort of last course speech and ultimate assassination in Memphis to leap to where we need to go today and what we need to do now was really, really brilliant. So that was it was really sort of special to be a part to hear her, to make that sort of connection.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was like, I want, if nothing else, to be there present. Hear that. I mean, I'm younger than you. I'm a white man. So I think for me, it was sort of startling and perhaps a good reminder to think she's not that old. This is within her lifetime.
Yes.
And that was a helpful, I think, reminders to be reminded of the past is not that long ago. And of course, she tied it back. There's some things happening in the moment, which are very troubling.
That's right. She made the connection of sort of with all that we thought we had accomplished.
Right.
We find ourselves sort of back at many of the moments her father faced. And she even talked about the story, which was a great story to hear, about when her father was going to speak at the disciples meeting. It wasn't the Christian church at that point, but speak at the disciples meeting in Dallas, Texas. And at that time, the pushback that was taking place, but the disciples, were firm that we'll go to a different city if that's the case.
I love hearing that story.
And that was sort of a special story to relate of
It really was.
this sort of the connection that the family had even to disciples. So yeah, really a powerful way to begin.
Absolutely. Well, so we're here, and I want to hear about, you've just come on to Phillips Seminary. I'm really excited. Like, I was so excited. Obviously, we've talked before on the podcast. I'll try to link some previous episodes we've talked. But I was really excited because, like, I've been familiar with your work, followed your work with the Lewis Center, and even your podcast there. So I was thrilled when I saw this news that you were being hired. So you've been at Phillips, 3 months?
6 months.
It's 6 months?
Yes,
Oh, my goodness.
I know. It's amazing. Yeah, 6 months.
What do you think? Like, what are your initial observations?
It really has been wonderful. The hospitality from everyone has been fantastic. The willingness to sort of engage and entertain new thoughts. I couldn't have asked for anything more. Phillips is really in a wonderful and unique space where we are doing very well financially, so much so that we're able to offer 100% scholarship help to disciples in underrepresented populations and 80% to pretty much everyone else. And we do that for, of course, both Master Divinity and D-Min, which is the unique piece. And I'm excited about that because in today's world where, particularly in our area, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, where many of the people are going to go into rural ministry, they're not going to go into huge steeple churches to be able to help students to get through seminary debt-free. I think is just tremendously huge. And it's a real gift. So I'm excited to be at a place that can really offer that sort of financial support to train students well, but at the same time, make sure that they don't come out of seminary with this mountain of debt that in some cases happens way too often for students who are going to go into a similar place and not be able to actually, maintain a good balance in their life. But the other piece that's been exciting for me, frankly, just has been learning about sort of Oklahoma and Tulsa. I was familiar with it. I was at St. Paul School of Theology in Missouri for a while, so familiar with Oklahoma, but really learning about the Tulsa area and just a commitment there to sort of indigenous sort of studies and the individuals and learning opportunities for Phillips to even do more in that area because it's such a critical piece of the history. And it's important, I think, for us to be a part of making sure that the stories are told, and we offer opportunities that take place to educate and, make a difference also within the indigenous community, respecting, of course, what is taking place already within those communities. So it really has been good, and excited about the work that I'm going to get to do.
And certainly Phillips has done a lot around trying to honor the legacy and memory of the Tulsa race riots and lifting up those stories that were silenced in many ways.
Yeah. It is it has been really interesting. I grew up sort of knowing that history. And didn't realize how unique that was until I actually came to Tulsa and heard from so many people who grew up in Tulsa that they were not familiar with the Tulsa race sort of massacre until much later in life and recently that really that history just was hidden from them. So it is, in some ways, a gift that we're able to do that lectureship, but also in some ways sad that lectureship is necessary. My hope with it is that we're able to not just do a historical perspective of sort of, this is what happened, but it's more so to help us think about the future and hopefully not to make the same mistake again? And what are the signs and what are the things we can do that we truly can avoid these sort of things taking place again in our country? Because I mean, it's devastating, and the impact. I mean, if you get an opportunity to come to Tulsa, as the community, of course, is rebuilding, but the impact of what it caused within the community is
devastating.
Completely devastating.
Yeah. And I think if I read correctly, the mayor has been initiating some work there too.
The mayor has definitely been initiating work. Tulsa has an African American mayor, and I it might be the first. I'm not. You don't quote me on that to be certain, but really wants to sort of honor the legacy of those who suffered by giving back, and is initiating sort of educational opportunities for those who are connected, and those educational opportunities, I think, are important. There are some who have been critical, saying it's not gone far enough, and those, and I always caution people to say, we always want people to sort of somehow magically wave a wand and make everything we want happen, and I'm like, that rarely is the case. And I think what he's trying to do is say, we've got to start someplace. And, and he's trying to put in place that place where we can start to actually try to repair some of what has taken place for the people who have suffered the most.
Well, I was really excited to see that when I read that. Yeah. So I think it's a great move and great story. I want to ask, when you think about Phillips, and certainly this episode, this conversation is going to be very disciples of Christ centric.
Yeah.
I hope to bring in some insights from your experience as a Methodist world. But I'm curious, when we think about a conversation that I have often on the podcast is around theological education, certainly the future of the church. And I think theological education is very important to the future of the church. What are your thoughts? And I'm curious, are there any key priorities as you think about the future that you're hoping to lead at Phillips?
Yeah, a couple that I've talked about. One is Phillips right now is in the midst of sort of building a new building called Bedford House.
Right.
And very exciting. And Bedford House is we talk about it as a place of belonging. And that word belonging is intentional. Wow. Intentional in that Phillips, of course, is a progressive seminary in the midst of a place in Oklahoma that is not nearly quite as progressive.
Right.
So when you think of belonging for all of the people who have been marginalized or underrepresented, and a place where they can feel safe, belonging is important. So LGBTQIA community, indigenous community, African American community. I mean, you could just go down a line, but a place where individuals can come and not only learn, but call it home, a place where they can truly belong. So really sort of helping to unpack that idea of belonging more, I think, is important. So building the building obviously is important and is critical, but I think the real work that I'm hoping where I can build off of what has already taken place is really helping us to unpack that idea of belonging and why it's important, not just for students, but for the church as a whole.
Right.
And that space becomes a place of belonging for individuals to come and feel like, in the midst of sometimes what can feel like spaces that aren't safe, they can find that place where they can have voice, be at the table, and truly belong. And the other I sort of alluded to earlier, I think it's critically important that we really help not only prepare students for rural ministry, but also with those who are already doing rural ministry, really help them to feel that the work they're doing not only is essential, because it is, but give them the resources to really do it well. I think because within mainline, which disciples is there's been this overall decline.
Right.
The goal is, how do we become sort of larger, and how do we create larger churches? The reality is what we have to do, not that we don't want larger churches.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not saying
Right.
that. But we have to think about vitality, particularly of our rural and small congregation. The vitality doesn't necessarily mean large. It means how do we make sure that we're impacting the community and that we're vital to the work that needs to be done. And I think we can make a real difference in that area, particularly given our context that very rural, and even the surrounding states around us of Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas,
Southern Colorado.
So, yeah, all very rural areas that where, so that work will be critically important.
Well, I think it's so great. I think both those points you highlighted. I mean, I've been fascinated of late with this, how certainly you probably study this in your work of the belong. How that model has flipped of like belong.
Believe, yes.
Believe, behave, belong.
That's right. And belonging now is what is critically important. Yeah. That is absolutely true. And it goes, and I'm forgetting her name, Diane Butler Bass. Butler Bass is the one who sort of initiated that work. And in the work, she talks about belonging is sort of particularly for newer generations. Believing is not where they start, it's belonging. And if they belong, they may work their way to believing. And I think that's absolutely true. And the model we're sort of building is that we really want to help people belong. And in belonging, hopefully you will find your space of moving into the believing aspect.
And I just got to give a shout out to the idea of the Bedford House, again, which crafts with this belonging. Because I remember when I was a student coming down for module week-long classes, and I was fortunate in most instances where I found someone to stay with. But, having that opportunity to rub shoulders with fellow students, is just such a important step. I felt like in my journey, fulfilling belonging and connectedness and all those things. So I'm just so glad to see it.
Well, and it's an opportunity also, in terms of learning, of bringing diverse people together. Part of belonging, again, is like I say, it's easy to sort of talk about it.
Right.
But even within underrepresented communities, when you are in the same space and then you start sort of negotiating things, that those also could be challenging conversations. So it's not just majority sort of versus underrepresented, using versus loosely, but it's even in underrepresented, like, how do we belong together and how do we understand and work towards common goals together? So I think for me, it's exciting that there's going to be those opportunities, like you say, where students will get an opportunity to sort of learn and community together of, this is a lot more challenging than I thought to actually create space, because some of the assumptions I may have had now are actually getting tested in ways I didn't expect them to get tested.
It's so good. Societally, we can be so filtered into our bubbles and into our spaces. So any opportunity for that third space or intermingling is so good.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about your work with Lewis Center, and even if you want to extend it more broadly into from the United Methodist Church. I mean, I don't know if you felt this way in the United Methodist Church, but I feel like in Disciples' world, denominations, for a good reason, can be very insular. I'm curious, like, what do you think about, what are some of your leanings from your time at Lewis Center that you think could be applicable to Phillips or perhaps to the denomination, to the disciples at large?
Yeah, I'll look at it from sort of the Lewis Center. One of the things that attracted me to Phillips is the Center for Ministry and Lay Training, CMLT.
Yes.
And it's not trying to make CMLT carbon copy of the Lewis Center, but CMLT is really unique, I think, within the disciples community for the work that it's doing and its offering an avenue for those who don't get an MDiv to still become pastors with a non-degree plan. And I understand that I think Lexington does it for those who are in the Latino, Hispanic community, and others. But more broadly, CMLT is sort of unique in sort of the sort of non-degree class offerings. I think there's a tremendous opportunity learning from the Lewis Center to sort of expand those opportunities, and to build up on what has already taken place. Because if you think about more and more people in the future becoming bivocational,
right,
that they're not going to probably have the opportunity in some cases to do degree offerings. So CMLT is going to be the place where they're going to be able to connect to theological education. So my work at the Lewis Center, I think, is going to be helpful as I work with our director there, Leslie LaSure, in thinking about what are the opportunities that make sense. Certainly within the disciple context, where we can expand and not only connect with disciples, but more broadly with others, where it makes sense to offer things that are going to be helpful to those who may be interested in theological education but don't want to do a degree program, those who are bivocational that just can't have the time to do the sort of even sort of asynchronous route for degree theological education. And then lay training. I mean, what are the opportunities for lay who may be interested in, I want to do just this one thing, but seminaries often don't offer this sort of one thing, or if it's in class, it's at a time when I can't do it because I have to work. So CMLT is going to be the perfect space to be able to make those sort of one-off offerings for a thing. So I really think my work at the Lewis Center is going to be helpful in working with Leslie and thinking about what are those places that we can really build out some of the offerings that will be wonderful, and making that a huge success as we move forward.
I'm really excited to hear that, and as I learn more about this Center for Ministry Lay Training, because this was a conversation I had recently with a past podcast guest. We talked about kind of these stackable certificates, or that kind of model of like someone might, I remember 2009 when I started my seminary journey, like it was such a big thing to bite off. And I remember that first semester, my wife was like, Loren, this is not, you can't chew all this.
Right.
Full time. We did not have kids yet. And I remember that second semester, I cut down my class load until I could kind of find an equilibrium. But I'm sure you know this better than I do. Like, there's people who don't make it from that first year to that second year because it is too much to chew off. And then when you think about the complications of student loans and financials,
that's right.
To me, it's just like it makes so much more sense, and it's such a easier sell to a student and their family. Like, hey, we're going to start with like a 3 month. I don't know how it works with the terms. 3 months, 6 months, or some kind of like bite size, chewable, to use stay with metaphor. I'm thrilled to hear it, and I'm thrilled that, like, it just, to me, it makes so much sense to think about like the infrastructure that a place like Phillips has to serve lay leaders in churches. I'm thrilled to see what comes of it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, but I'm really excited about that work.
Yeah, I want to ask, since we're kind of on this broad topic of theological education, I've actually kind of talked around it already. Like, are there any other thoughts? Again, past conversation I had on the podcast was kind of like, it seemed like in some instances, like the value of it, MDiv, or even theological education writ large within some Christian contexts is kind of declining. I mean, you're in the market of theological education. Like, what are your thoughts on continuing to value theological education within church or Protestantism writ large?
Yeah, I think it's not, the value isn't declining. The challenge is that you have a perfect storm where mainline denominations are declining.
Yeah.
And the reality of mainline denominations declining is that you have the need for less full-time pastors.
Right.
So it's not that they don't value sort of, particularly in this case, the Master of Divinity.
Sure.
It's that where are you going to put them?
Yeah.
Right. So that's the sort of struggle. And all seminaries, particularly mainline, are going to have to deal with that challenge of that. Likely there are going to be less Master of Divinity students because literally the place that supports us, there isn't a home for those students, given the current circumstance that there's been decline each year. And again, this is where I think the Center for Ministry and Lay Training is so valuable, that what's going to happen is you're going to have sort of different pathways to help educate students. The Master of Divinity is still going to be critically important. It's just not going to be the only way that you educate students, that you're going to have available something similar to what we have in the Center for Ministry and Lay Training moving forward, because people are still going to go into ministry, and the disciples, Methodists, Presbyterian, whatever, are still going to have people in ministry. It's just that they're going to have alternative pathways for how individuals get there. And the question is, how do you educate those people? And thinking about that now, just so you're prepared to have the alternative pathways to educate them, I think is going to be critically important.
Yeah.
So it's the difference, I think, is going to be, before pretty much there was sort of one major pathway to get there.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have more than that one major pathway to get there. Just because even though people may want the Master of Divinity degree, the reality is that it's going to be tougher and tougher to place individuals with a Master of Divinity degree, because there just aren't going to be enough congregations that can support sort of the full-time package needed to do so.
I should ask about this, even if this is kind of getting the weeds a little bit, but it's something that I've been curious about. Folks have had conversations, certainly, like whether the MDiv itself should be reimagined as more like an MBA type degree. Do you have any thoughts around that? Whether like the MDiv itself needs to be examined?
I think that the MDiv certainly has to considerably be adapted. And the tricky piece is, and this is what makes it a unique degree in some ways, is that I think that it's critical to get that theological base that the MDiv provides, because, I mean, you're helping people to be formed in the think theologically. Yeah. And that
I
is,
remember that from Phillips.
Yeah. I mean, that's just critically important. And it's frustrating when people say, well, they didn't teach me that in seminary. What I want to say is, no, what we taught you is how to think theologically, so you could figure this stuff out.
Good.
Right.
Good.
So I would have say that, but I do think, and this again, for me, is where something like the Center for Ministry and Lay Training comes in, is how do we supplement that nowadays to give individuals those other components of things that you would need, because you've got to be more innovative in the church today. You've got to have these other skills in the church that are critically important in terms of training. So it's not an either or for me. It's like that sort of traditional MDiv is still critically important, but then how do we marry that with some of these critical pieces of financial stewardship, innovative thinking? I mean, those things that would help, students who are going to go in ministry to really succeed. So sort of a both and approach for me of what we need to do.
And certainly I think about, like, for better or worse, the economy is very much of like, no one is like just getting a degree and then like working 30 years. Like they're like, they recognize like, I have to keep certifying and doing this programming and this education. So I think that makes sense. I want to ask too, before we finish up, like you mentioned decline several times in this conversation. Like this is something you're familiar with in your Methodist church. certainly disciples are not immune. And, let's be frank, this is a conversation that's not, I don't think nearly any branch or sector, tradition within American Christianity is immune from. What do you think is the role, the responsibility of institutions like Phillips to help? I mean, obviously you can't change the entire system. You got to trust the Spirit to bring revival and renewal. But what do you think, how Phillips can be a part of that, I suppose?
I think a couple of things. I think it's important to remember congregations play a critical role in calling traditionally. Today, not only is the congregation that plays a critical role, but people, particularly young people, have, again, alternative pathways in the ministry. And one of those is sort of community engagement, social justice would be another one.
Right.
Where our institutions like us can play a role is those individuals may not be as connected to the church.
Right.
So in the work we do in sort of connecting with students who in undergrad may have done something within the social justice arena, who come to seminary and now they're receiving the theological training, it may, open up a calling to say, hey, I was thinking about nonprofit, but now I can see where I'm also interested in the church to go along with that. So I think the role we play is we don't have as much influence sort of in the congregational aspect. I mean, there's some, but not as much, because of course my hope is, and Phillips faculty are wonderful at, they're out preaching and teaching in congregations, which helps, to people hearing saying, yeah, I do have that calling. But I do think we can sort of expand sort of, those individuals who probably are thinking, I want nothing to do with sort of this, to say, you know what, now that I've sort of entered into it through this particular pathway, I have more interest maybe in what that may mean ultimately for the type of work I want to do. So I think that's going to be, not only for Phillips, but for theological education as a whole, a growing place where you're going to see people who, just because the landscape has changed, come to theological education, not necessarily through the church, but through some of these other pathways like social justice.
Well, that's helpful to think about, because I think about, I grew up Independent Baptist with there wasn't quite the academia of, you go to seminary, which you go to Bible college.
Yeah.
And only the select nerds really stayed on to go to graduate school or seminary. But there was a kind of transition out of high school. You high school, and then you feel called, you go to Bible college or ministry college, ministry training center. And that's why I've sort of wondered, what is that pathway for younger students? And you're suggesting, if I'm hearing right, it's really going to be these non-traditional folks.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're going to see, just given the way they're being trained, in sort of community engagement efforts, which strongly connected often to sort of social justice, than in actual, when they go to college or universities or doing social justice degrees or something related to that's a pathway. And many of these students aren't in a church. Or loosely connected to a church, but real interest in making a difference in the world. So that's where I see institutions being able to sort of have an impact of how do we connect with those students. At Phillips, we offer a Master of Arts in Social Justice. So that taking that and saying, I can either go into nonprofit work, or I say, or it's oh, I didn't realize, I thought about this really narrowly, but now my mind's been broadened so I can see more opportunities to maybe do something more directly related to ministry than I would initially have thought.
I mean, I suppose it tracks with that whole belong, behave, believe model.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're obviously in a time of great disruption, I suppose. And what do you think let me ask these two closing questions. What do you think history will remember for this time? And then I suppose after that, I'll ask the other, like, what do you hope for the future of Christianity? So let's start with, what do you think history will remember from this time?
It's an interesting question because, I mean, there's sort of, if you think about the United States context and sort of the shrinking, particularly of diversity, equity, and inclusion that has taken place, depending on how long this happens and where this heads, I think history is going to look back and say that it's unfortunate that that's the pathway we went down of trying to separate people and divide them instead of thinking of ways that we could really become a better nation together.
Yeah.
So I think within this context, that's something that definitely, 25, 30 years from now, as people look back and say, just depending on where this heads, could be remembered. I hope that's not the case. I hope I'm wrong and that we're remembered for something different.
Yeah.
But that could be the case. My hope for the future relates to that is that we can actually sort of help people see a different vision of how we can be together. I mean, to me, that is, really at the heart of who we should be as Christians. How do we help people to live into, I use the language of the kingdom, where they can see that it doesn't have to be this separation, that it doesn't mean we have to be pitted against one another, that there's actually a way for us to live together. And it doesn't mean we won't disagree and that things are going to be perfect, but it's not that because I am succeeding, that means you have to fail, or that you're succeeding, that I have to fail.
Some game.
That's right. So my hope is that there's a way to actually create a vision to help people to live into that in ways that we have not been able to do to this point.
Well, and this is something that I've always found so compelling about the disciples' tradition. I think you would argue, if I understand Methodism enough, that there's some similarities within the Methodist tradition, but around the table, all are welcome and all gather despite our differences, theology and politics and what have you. We gather together to Christ's name.
Yeah, I mean, disciples, similar to Methodists, I'm going to use communion, invite everyone to communion. Like there's, you don't get to say, well, no, you don't get to come, or that's right. So thinking about that sort of image where we invite everyone to participate in communion who, feels and really wants to do so. How do we create such a vision in other places where we all come together in communion for the work we're doing?
Well, I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate the conversation. Really encourage folks to check out Phillips and the work they're doing. And I'm really excited about the future of Phillips and appreciate your service to the seminary.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
We always leave folks with a word of peace, so may God's peace be with you.
Also with you.
Thanks for joining us on the Future Christian Podcast. The Future Christian Podcast is produced by Resonate Media. We love to hear from our listeners with questions, comments, and ideas for future episodes. Visit our website at future-christian.com and find the Connect with Us form at the bottom of the page to get in touch with Martha or Loren. But before you go, do us a favor. Subscribe to the pod to leave a review. It really helps us get this out to more people. Thanks, and go in peace.